The dumpster behind Romano's Italian kitchen had become my breakfast spot. Not because I liked it, but because they threw away their leftover bread every morning at 9:30 sharp and it was usually still warm. I used to be a combat medic in the Army. 12 years of service, 2 deployments, and a chest full of ribbons that didn't mean a damn thing now. After I got discharged, I thought civilian life would be simple. I was wrong. When you've spent years patching up soldiers under fire, you expect people back home to understand what that means. They don't. Employers smile politely when they hear veteran, then their faces change the second you mention PTSD. We'll call you, they say. They never do. 3 months after leaving Fort Hood, I was living out of a 2007 Chevy Silverado that smelled like sweat and motor oil. The VA appointments were endless. The pills made me foggy, and I kept missing interviews because I couldn't focus. My sister, Isabel, said I was just being lazy. "You're a disgrace to our family," she told me over the phone one night. "Dad served with honor. You came back broken." That was the last conversation we had before she cut me off completely. The house we'd inherited from our parents gone. Isabel refinanced it under both our names without telling me, then disappeared when the bank came knocking. By the time I found out, the foreclosure notice had my signature forged on it. The credit damage was permanent. So was the betrayal. It's funny how fast you can fall from respected soldier to invisible nobody. One day, people thank you for your service. The next, they won't make eye contact. I tried to rent a studio apartment, but with my credit ruined, no landlord would take me. I stayed in motels until the money ran out. Then came the truck. Then nothing. Winter hit Illinois early that year. I remember scraping frost off the inside of the windshield with a credit card. I'd park behind an old gas station at night, crawl into my sleeping bag, and listen to the hum of the highway like it was the world moving on without me. The Army taught me how to keep people alive. It didn't teach me how to survive myself. One morning, I woke up to the sound of someone knocking on the window. It was the property owner shouting that I couldn't sleep there. I drove until the fuel light came on, then parked behind Romano's because it smelled like garlic and safety. That's where I met the city's forgotten ones. People like Earl, a Vietnam vet who sold scrap metal for coffee money, and Tanya, a single mom who'd lost her job when the diner she worked at shut down. Nobody looked anyone in the eye for long. It was an unspoken rule, respect each other's ghosts. I traded my last set of dog tags for a warm coat at a secondhand store. The clerk looked at me like I'd stolen it from someone. Maybe I had in a way. At night, I replayed moments from the war. The sounds of medevac choppers, the smell of burned sand, the look in a soldier's eyes when you tell him you can't stop the bleeding. I used to wake up screaming. Now, I just woke up tired. The VA counselor said I should join a support group. I tried once. The meeting was in a church basement. Half the guys there spent more time talking about God than recovery. The other half just stared at the floor. When I mentioned sleeping in my truck, one of them said, "At least you got a truck." That was the last meeting I attended. I tried calling Isabel again, one last time. Straight to voicemail. She'd blocked me. I left a message anyway. "You don't have to help me. Just tell me why." She never did. By October, the Silverado broke down completely. I sold it to a junkyard for $400, bought a sleeping bag, and started learning where it was safe to sleep. Under bridges was too risky drunks. Cops, sometimes worse. Church steps were better, but you had to leave before sunrise. Romano's dumpster became my routine. The manager must have known. He'd double bag the bread, sometimes toss a couple of takeout boxes right on top where they were easy to grab. A silent kindness, the kind you don't talk about. I wasn't completely alone. That's where I met Tommy Reynolds. He was a Marine back in the 82nds, older than me, gray beard, sharp eyes that had seen too much. He had a shopping cart full of neatly stacked cans and a folded flag taped to the handle. "You Army?" he asked the first morning I showed up. "Was," I said. He nodded. "We're all was out here." Tommy showed me which restaurants threw out food that was still good, which shelters were safe, which ones had bed bugs. He'd been on the streets for nearly a decade. The man had more survival skills than most officers I'd ever met. I asked him once how he ended up out here. He shrugged. "Divorce. PTSD. The usual." It didn't take long before we became a team. He watched my stuff while I looked for day jobs. Sometimes I'd patch up cuts or treat infections for other homeless vets. They called me Doc. It felt good to be useful again, even if my medical kit was just rubbing alcohol in gauze from a free clinic. One night, Tommy and I sat behind the restaurant, splitting a loaf of bread. He looked at me and said, "You still think someone's coming to save you?" I laughed. "Nobody's coming. Not for people like us." He nodded slowly. That's what I thought too. A gust of wind blew through the alley, carrying the smell of garlic and rain. My sleeping bag was already damp. I leaned back against the wall, pulling the coat tighter. The frost on the ground was starting to stick, turning white under the streetlight. That's when I heard footsteps steady, expensive, out of place. I turned my head just enough to see a man in a navy suit walking down the alley, leather shoes clicking against wet concrete. For a second, I thought he was lost. Then he stopped a few feet away from me and said, "Clear and professional, Maeve Carter?" I froze. Nobody had said my full name in months. Tommy looked at me, confused. The man held out something, a photograph maybe. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "Are you Maeve Carter, formerly of the United States Army Medical Corps?" I nodded slowly. "Who's asking?" He smiled slightly. "My name is Gregory Hale. I'm an attorney from New York. I believe you're the person I've been searching for." And just like that, for the first time in years, someone was looking for me. The photograph in Gregory Hale's hand caught the light from the alley lamp, and for a second I saw myself the way I used to be, clean-shaven, uniform pressed, a medic patch on my shoulder that once meant something. The air was cold enough to sting, but my hands felt hotter than asphalt. I didn't take the photo, I just stared. Gregory looked too polished for that alley. His shoes alone were worth more than everything I owned. I wanted to laugh, but I hadn't laughed in months. I just asked, "Why are you looking for me?" He replied like a man used to giving bad news, "Because you're about to inherit a responsibility and possibly a fortune." I didn't move. People don't come to alleys to offer good things. He handed me a business card with gold lettering. The weight of it in my palm felt unreal. "There's a car waiting nearby," he said. "If you'll come with me to New York, I'll explain everything." I didn't say yes or no. I just watched him leave, his footsteps echoing against the wet pavement. The alley went quiet again except for the hum of a distant truck. Tommy stared at me like I'd been handed a ticket out of hell. "You gonna take it?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "Seems too easy." "Nothing good comes easy," he muttered. "But sometimes, it's still good." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there under the half-broken awning, thinking about what it meant to be found. The world had ignored me for so long that the idea someone wanted something from me, anything felt dangerous. By morning, I was starving. Romano's had thrown out pasta and garlic bread, and I was digging through the bags when a security guard showed up. "You can't be here," he barked. "Yeah, I can," I said quietly, pulling my coat tighter. "You just don't want to see me here." He didn't have an answer for that. Tommy and I walked toward the river. The sunrise hit the rooftops, turning them gold, the kind of view people pay millions for while we stood there, trying to decide which dumpster to check next. "You ever think it's crazy?" I asked him. "How we fought for this country, and now the country pretends we don't exist?" "All the time," he said. "But that's the thing about serving you. Don't get to choose who's grateful." He had a point. Tommy had the kind of wisdom that came from too many winters on concrete. He'd lost 2 fingers to frostbite years back and joked about it like it was a badge. He'd been a Marine during Beirut. We didn't talk about that night much, but sometimes he'd drift off mid-sentence, staring into nothing. I asked him once if he ever thought about getting help. He shook his head. "The help never lasts. They give you a bed for a night, a check for a week, then they move on. Out here, nobody pretends." It wasn't until I found a half-eaten sandwich that I realized I hadn't eaten since the day before. I split it in half and handed the other piece to Tommy. "You don't have to," he said. "Neither do you," I replied. We sat in silence for a long time. Then Tommy said, "You know, that guy might be real." "Yeah, or he's a con artist." "Maybe," he said. "But if he's real, you should go. Someone out there still remembers your name. That's worth more than a hot meal." He had a point. I didn't want to admit it, but something in me had started to shift. After months of being invisible, suddenly I had a name again. Maeve Carter. I'd almost forgotten how that sounded when spoken by someone who wasn't angry. I spent the next 2 days thinking about the lawyer. I still had the business card, creased now, but the letters were sharp. Gregory Hale, Esquire, Hale and Morton LLP, Manhattan. Every time I looked at it, I felt like I was holding a ticket to a life I didn't believe in anymore. But I didn't throw it away. That night, it rained. The kind of rain that soaks through everything. My sleeping bag turned heavy and cold. Tommy had managed to build a small fire inside a metal drum, and we huddled close, the steam rising from our wet clothes. "If you're gonna go," he said, "you better do it before winter hits. You won't make it through another one out here." "I'm sick." I stared at the fire. "I've survived worse." He laughed. "That's the problem. You keep surviving instead of living." The rain didn't stop for 2 days. The streets turned into mirrors, puddles reflecting the city lights that looked so close and so far at the same time. I watched people walk by with umbrellas and coffee cups, stepping around us like we were stains they couldn't scrub out. Late that evening, I heard a commotion near the shelter. A man was yelling something about stolen blankets. By the time I got there, 2 guys were fighting. One of them was a kid, couldn't have been older than 20. He had that wild, desperate look in his eyes, the kind I'd seen in wounded soldiers who didn't know they were dying. I stepped in, pushed them apart, and handed the kid my blanket. "Take it," I said. "You need it more." He looked confused, like kindness was a language he hadn't heard in years. "Why?" he asked. "Because I can." End quote. He ran off into the rain without saying another word. Tommy shook his head. "You're too soft for this world." "Maybe," I said. "But softness is the only thing keeping me human." When the storm finally cleared, I walked back to Romano's and saw a black car parked near the alley. The same man in the suit was standing there, holding an umbrella. Gregory Hale looked exactly as he had before, clean, calm, untouched by everything around him. He didn't waste time. "Miss Carter," he said, "I hope you've had time to think." "I have," I said, squinting up at him, "and I still don't trust you." "That's fine," he said. "Trust isn't required, just curiosity." He gestured toward the car. The interior lights glowed like a doorway to another world. I looked back at Tommy. He gave me a half smile. "Go," he said. "If it's a trap, you'll patch yourself up and crawl back." I laughed first time in months. "Yeah, guess I've done worse missions." I climbed into the car. The door shut with a solid thud that sounded final. Gregory sat across from me, his briefcase on his lap, his expression unreadable. The driver pulled away from the curb, the alley fading behind us. I didn't look back. For the first time since leaving the army, I wasn't running from something. I was heading somewhere. The city rolled by like a movie I didn't belong in. The car heater hummed softly, and for the first time in months, I wasn't cold. Gregory Hale sat across from me, silent, focused on his phone. He looked like the kind of man who only existed in offices with marble floors. The kind of man who never had to check if a dumpster bag was clean before eating from it. The leather seat creaked when I shifted. I didn't trust comfort anymore. Comfort meant someone was about to ask for something. "You really think I'm going to believe this?" I said. "A stranger walks into an alley and tells me I've inherited something? You realize how that sounds?" He looked up, his expression patient but not patronizing. "I understand your skepticism, Miss Carter. It's why I came in person." He handed me a folder, thick with documents. "Your great-grandfather, Mr. Colton Wade, passed away last month. He named you in his final will." I let out a dry laugh. "Colton who?" Gregory tapped the corner of the folder. "Colton Wade. Manhattan resident, art collector, and philanthropist. You're listed as one of 2 beneficiaries." "Let me guess," I said. "The other one's my sister." He hesitated just long enough to confirm it. "Yes, Miss Isabel Carter." I leaned back and exhaled hard. The name felt like poison. "You've got the wrong person. I haven't spoken to her in 3 years. And last I checked, I don't have any rich relatives." "Mr. Wade was your mother's grandfather," Gregory explained. "He followed your career. He knew you served in Afghanistan. He also knew about your circumstances after discharge." I stared at him, anger flickering under my ribs. "So he watched me lose everything and did nothing?" Gregory didn't answer. He just adjusted his cufflinks and said quietly, "He left you a message. A personal one. You'll understand when you see it. The folder was full of things that didn't feel real: property deeds, notarized papers, photos of a penthouse overlooking Central Park. I flipped through the pages like they belonged to someone else. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The total estate is valued at approximately $49 million. I closed the folder slowly. "That's insane." "Not as insane as ignoring it," he said. The car pulled into a small regional airport. It wasn't a commercial terminal, just a private hangar with a sleek jet waiting inside, engines purring softly. I stepped out, blinking under the bright floodlights. The air smelled cleaner, sharper, like money had its own atmosphere. Gregory motioned toward the plane. "We can be in New York by noon. There's food, a shower, and fresh clothes waiting on board. You don't have to make any commitments yet. Just hear the message." I should have said no. It made no sense to follow a stranger onto a plane because of some dead relative I didn't remember, but the truth was, I didn't have anything left to lose. "Fine," I said. "But if you're lying, I'll make you regret it." He smiled faintly. "You have the look of someone who could." Inside the jet, everything was too perfect. Cream leather seats, polished wood, bottled water with names I couldn't pronounce. I sank into a chair that reclined automatically. Gregory handed me a bag. "There's a change of clothes in there. We estimated your size based on military records." I took it without a word and headed to the small restroom. When the hot water hit my skin, it was like being punched in the lungs. I hadn't felt warmth like that since leaving the army showers years ago. I scrubbed until my skin stung, until I didn't smell like the street anymore. When I caught my reflection in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. The flight took less than 2 hours. Gregory sat across from me the whole time, occasionally glancing at his tablet. Eventually I asked, "So this guy, Wade, why me? He didn't even know me." Gregory clasped his hands together. "Mr. Wade was very private. He believed in legacy. From what I've read in his notes, he saw something in you, something connected to his own life story. You'll understand when you see the video." I raised an eyebrow. "Video? What is this, a game show?" He almost smiled. "Not exactly. More like a final conversation from a man who valued tests of character." Dell. That word character made me flinch. It's what people say when they're trying to sound moral while doing something cruel. The jet descended into New York airspace, the skyline rising like a steel forest. I hadn't been here since before deployment. The last time, I was standing in Times Square, 26, full of purpose. Now I was 37, sitting in a private jet, wondering how my life had managed to implode and restart at the same time. As we drove through Manhattan, I watched people rushing by: suits, taxis, umbrellas, all moving like they had a map, and I didn't. Gregory's car pulled into a building with a marble entrance and gold-plated letters that read Wade Tower. The doorman didn't even blink when he saw me. He just nodded like I belonged. That was new. We took a private elevator straight to the top. The penthouse was the size of an entire floor, windows stretching from wall to wall. Manhattan lay below like a lit-up grid of second chances. Every surface gleamed. Every piece of furniture looked like it came from a museum. "Mr. Wade lived here alone for the last 20 years, Gregory said, walking ahead. He had no spouse, no children, only his work and his collections. I ran my fingers along the back of a leather chair. Sounds lonely. He preferred the word selective. He led me to a study with wood-paneled walls and shelves of old books. There was a large monitor on the desk. "This is where you'll watch the message," Gregory said. "It will play once and only once," Mr. Wade insisted. He pressed a button on a small remote, and the screen flickered to life. The man on the screen looked old but not fragile. Silver hair, sharp blue eyes, posture like a general. "Hello, Maeve," he said, his voice surprisingly strong. "If you're watching this, then my attorney, Mr. Hale, has done his job. You're probably wondering why a stranger left you everything he owned. The answer begins long before you were born." I leaned forward, heart pounding, as the old man continued. "In 1952, he said, I was a soldier returning from the Korean War. I came home broken, angry, and homeless. One night, I nearly froze to death behind a diner in New Jersey. A woman found me there, a nurse named Eliza Carter. She took me in, fed me, nursed me back to health. She never asked for anything in return. Without her, I would have died in that alley. The name hit me like a punch. Eliza Carter. My grandmother. Colton's voice softened. I spent the rest of my life trying to repay that debt. But true debts of kindness can't be repaid. They can only be passed forward. That's why I chose you, Maeve. You are her blood. And you will carry her work forward. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, and I had to grip the armrest to steady myself. Colton leaned closer to the camera. You will receive my estate under one condition. Within 3 years, you must help 75 homeless veterans rebuild their lives. Housing, therapy, employment, whatever they need. Do this, and the estate is yours. Fail, and everything transfers to your sister, Isabel Carter. The room was silent except for the hum of the city below. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the penthouse. Gregory spoke quietly beside me. Mr. Wade was clear about the terms. The clock starts when you leave this room. I stared at the frozen image of Colton on the screen, his expression proud, unflinching. I thought about my sister, about the months I'd spent digging through trash just to stay alive. My voice came out rough. If this is his test, I'm taking it. Gregory nodded once, adjusting his tie. Then let's begin. The air inside the penthouse felt too still, like even the dust was waiting for me to make a decision. Gregory Hale stood nearby, watching with the kind of composure only lawyers and undertakers have. My reflection in the window didn't look like a millionaire in waiting. It looked like someone who'd stumbled into the wrong movie. I finally turned to Gregory. You said the clock starts now. What does that even mean? He pointed toward a folder on the desk. Mr. Wade left a detailed outline, contacts, trusts, and a dedicated account to fund your mission. Everything you'll need is here. But the work begins immediately. I opened the folder and skimmed through pages of logistics. There were lists of organizations, phone numbers, even suggested partners. It was all too organized, too deliberate. So he really planned this down to the last detail. Gregory nodded. Colton Wade didn't believe in leaving anything to chance. He once said, redemption must come with structure, or it becomes chaos. Sounds like something a rich guy would say. He gave a small smile. He was a rich guy, but he also lived through hell before that. You might find you have more in common than you think. The idea irritated me. I didn't like being compared to a man who died surrounded by luxury while I'd been fighting frostbite behind a restaurant. I shoved the papers back in the folder and said, I'll do it. But on my terms. That's all he ever wanted, Gregory replied. He offered to drive me to the hotel he'd arranged. I didn't argue. The adrenaline had worn off, and all I could feel was exhaustion, a deep, bone-level kind that no amount of sleep ever fixes. The hotel was Midtown, the kind of place that didn't ask questions as long as you didn't drip on the carpet. When I walked into the room, I froze. There was a bed, crisp, white sheets, a real pillow. For a moment, I just stood there staring, afraid I'd dirty it just by breathing. I sat on the edge and let the silence sink in. Then it hit me. I didn't know what to do with comfort anymore. My body didn't trust it. My hands kept twitching like they were waiting for the next problem to solve. A knock at the door pulled me back. Room service. Gregory must have arranged it. A young guy wheeled in a tray of food, steak, vegetables, even dessert. I hadn't had a hot meal in months. The smell hit me like a flash grenade. I ate until my stomach hurt, half in disbelief that no one was going to take it away. When I finished, I opened the curtains and looked down at the streetlights. The city pulsed like a living organism, loud, bright, indifferent. Somewhere out there, 75 veterans were sleeping in alleys just like I had. And if I didn't help them, Isabel would walk away with everything. That thought alone kept me awake. The next morning, Gregory picked me up at 8 a.m. sharp. He was the same as always, impeccable suit, calm voice, and a schedule that seemed written by a machine. We'll start with Mr. Wade's files, he said. He kept extensive notes on potential organizations. I've arranged a meeting with a consultant this afternoon, a Dr. Nolan Brooks. I frowned. Consultant for what? Veteran rehabilitation. He runs a counseling program for combat vets. Mr. Wade admired his work. We drove to a quiet office in the Upper East Side. Inside, the walls were covered in photos of veterans shaking hands, smiling, graduating from job programs. Dr. Brooks was younger than I expected, mid-40s, clean-cut, eyes sharp behind his glasses. He greeted me with the professional warmth of someone who's seen too many broken people trying to look fine. Maeve Carter, he said, shaking my hand. Gregory told me about Mr. Wade's condition for your inheritance. Ambitious, but not impossible. 75 homeless veterans in 3 years, I said. I don't even know where to start. He smiled. You start with one. That line stuck with me. It sounded simple, but it carried the kind of weight you don't notice until later. Dr. Brooks explained how most outreach programs failed. They focused on numbers instead of people. You can't just give someone a bed and call it a solution, he said. They need structure, therapy, community. Otherwise, they're right back where they started. Sounds expensive, I muttered. It's cheaper than neglect, he replied. Gregory glanced at me. Mr. Wade's trust covers the expenses. You'll have full control as long as you meet quarterly progress reports. I wasn't used to that kind of responsibility anymore. I'd gone from scrounging for half-eaten pizza to being handed a multi-million-dollar mission. The contrast made me dizzy. Dr. Brooks offered to help design the program. We'll need staff, housing facilities, medical partnerships, and outreach workers who understand the street, he said. Do you have anyone you trust? Only one name came to mind. Yeah, I said. A Marine named Tommy Reynolds. Good, Brooks said. Bring him in. You'll need people who know the reality of homelessness, not just the theory. By the time we left the office, my head was buzzing with logistics. Gregory handed me a folder full of contracts to sign while I stared out the window at the endless stream of pedestrians. Every one of them looked like they were in a hurry to forget something. Back at the hotel, I called the shelter near Romano's, where Tommy sometimes stayed. When he finally picked up, his voice cracked through static. Doc? That you? It's me, I said. I'm in New York. I've got an offer. He laughed. You sound like a recruiter again. What kind of offer? The kind that changes everything. I need your help. He hesitated. You serious? As a heart attack. I'll explain when you get here. Can you make it? He paused. I've got nothing keeping me. Where do I go? I gave him the address of the hotel and told him to come as soon as he could. When I hung up, I realized something unexpected. I was smiling. For the first time in years, I actually had a mission again. The next morning, Tommy showed up in jeans and a battered jacket. He looked the same, rough, tired, but alive. I opened the door and he just stood there for a second, shaking his head. You look like a damn movie star, he said. Don't get used to it, I replied. We've got work to do. Gregory met us in the lobby and went over the trust structure. The foundation will be called the Wade Veterans Outreach Program, he said. You'll serve as director. Funds will be allocated quarterly, contingent on results. Tommy whistled low. That's a hell of a name for two people with a bad track record of rent payments. I smirked. Guess we're moving up in the world. Gregory didn't react. You'll also have access to one of Mr. Wade's smaller properties to use as headquarters. It's in the Bronx. The Bronx? Tommy asked. Not exactly Park Avenue. Mr. Wade believed the work should be done where it's needed most, Gregory said simply. When we arrived, the building looked half-dead, peeling paint, broken windows, graffiti on the walls. But it had space, electricity, and the faint smell of possibility. I walked through the empty rooms, imagining beds, counseling offices, maybe even a kitchen someday. Tommy followed behind, arms crossed. You really think we can pull this off? I turned to him. We've both seen worse odds. He laughed. That we have, Doc. The floorboards creaked under our boots as I stepped into what would become my office. I ran my hand across the dusty window frame, feeling the grit stick to my skin. Outside, traffic rumbled in the distance, steady and alive. For the first time since leaving the army, I wasn't just surviving. I was building something. The Bronx building smelled like old paint and stubborn hope. Tommy kicked an empty paint can out of the way while I stood in the middle of the dusty floor, hands on my hips, trying to picture what this place could become. It didn't look like a $49 million inheritance. It looked like a test I hadn't studied for. Gregory Hale watched from the doorway, arms folded, face unreadable. Mr. Wade left everything here for a reason, he said. He believed in starting from the ground up, literally. Yeah. Well, the ground's missing tiles, Tommy muttered. I ignored him. There was something oddly comforting about the wreckage. It felt honest. I'd seen military tents in worse shape. At least this place had walls. Gregory set a small case on a folding table we'd dragged in from a thrift store. Before we go any further, he said, there's something you haven't seen yet. Mr. Wade recorded a second message. It was meant for this stage of the process. I frowned. Another video? Yes, Gregory said. He wanted you to see it once you began the work. Think of it as guidance. He opened the case and pulled out a sleek tablet. The screen lit up with the same dim glow I'd seen in the penthouse. My heart kicked against my ribs when Colton Wade's face appeared again. Maeve, he began, his voice calm but edged with weariness. If you're watching this, you've accepted the task. Good. That means you haven't given up yet. But understand this. What I'm asking of you isn't charity, it's transformation. These people you'll help aren't projects. They're mirrors. You'll see your own scars in theirs. I shifted in my chair. He was right, though I hated how much. You'll want to fix them, Colton continued. You can't. Not all of them. Some will fall, some will lie, some will steal from you. Help them anyway. The real test isn't how many you save, but how many you don't stop trying to. And the screen flickered, and for a moment I thought it was over. Then he added, and if you're wondering why your sister was included, she was my reminder of what happens when a family turns away from its wounded. The image froze on his face, stern, almost paternal. I sat back, feeling the weight of his words settle in my chest. Tommy scratched his beard. Well, that was inspiring and terrifying all at once. Story of my life, I muttered. Gregory cleared his throat. There's more. Mr. Wade set up a quarterly review. I'll oversee it. Progress will be documented, verified numbers, real outcomes. I'm not here to interfere, but the law firm must ensure compliance. Translation, Tommy said. You're the babysitter. Gregory almost smiled. Something like that. I stood and looked around the room again. We'll need volunteers, therapists, housing partners, maybe a medical liaison. Doctor. Brooks arrived later that afternoon, clipboard in hand, looking every bit like a man who thrived on order. Congratulations, he said, surveying the space. This is exactly where real work starts, where nobody else wants to be. He wasn't wrong. The neighborhood was loud, alive, and broken in the same way most of us were. Sirens echoed a few blocks away. Kids played soccer in the alley with a crushed soda can. We got to work. Dr. Brooks helped design the intake process. Every veteran who walked through the door would get an evaluation: physical health, mental health, and job readiness. Tommy handled logistics, beds, supplies, safety. I handled everything else. The first week, only 2 people showed up. One was a guy named Marcus, an army mechanic who hadn't spoken to his family in 5 years. The other was a woman named Denise, a Navy vet with a limp and a temper that could crack glass. Marcus refused to sleep indoors the first night, said walls made him nervous. Denise accused Tommy of stealing her backpack, then apologized with tears in her eyes. Dr. Brooks said it was normal. Trauma doesn't leave quietly, he said. By the second month, we had 12 residents. By the third, we were at capacity. The Bronx building was alive again, barely, but alive. Some nights I slept in the office because I couldn't turn my brain off. I'd walk the halls, listening to the sounds of people breathing in their bunks, dreaming instead of freezing to death. It was the kind of exhaustion that felt like purpose. Still, the pressure never stopped. Every time I saw Gregory's name flash on my phone, my stomach twisted. He wasn't cruel, just methodical. Miss Carter, he'd say, please submit your monthly report. The trust requires updates. I'd send spreadsheets, progress notes, photos. He'd reply with polite approval and one sentence that always sounded the same: keep going. We were doing it slowly, awkwardly, but it was happening. Veterans found jobs, families reunited. Some slipped away, but others stayed and built something solid. For the first time, I could see the faint outline of 75. Then one night, everything cracked. A resident named Troy, a former paratrooper with untreated PTSD, had a breakdown during dinner. He threw a chair through the window, screaming that the government was watching us. We tried to calm him down, but when he pulled a knife, Tommy stepped in. They struggled, and the blade nicked Tommy's arm. It wasn't deep, but the blood was enough to freeze everyone. I grabbed the first aid kit and pressed gauze against the wound. You're fine, I said, forcing calm into my voice. You're fine, Tommy. Troy collapsed on the floor, Sobbing, Dr. Brooks sedated him and called for an ambulance. The cops showed up, asked questions, and left after realizing nobody wanted to press charges. Later, when the building was quiet again, Tommy looked at me and said, "You still think you can save 75?" I didn't answer. I just kept pressure on his bandage until the bleeding stopped. That night, I sat alone in my office, staring at the ledger of names we'd helped so far, 23. I wanted to be proud. Instead, I felt empty. For every person who'd made it, 2 more were still out there. The next morning, I found an envelope on my desk. No return address, just my name. Inside was a clipping from a newspaper. Wade Veterans Program faces scrutiny over safety concerns. I knew exactly where it came from. Isabel. She had money, connections, and a grudge the size of Texas. If I failed, she'd inherit everything. And if she couldn't make me fail, she'd make it look like I did. Tommy came in with coffee and saw the paper. "You gonna let her do this?" I took a slow sip, forcing a smile I didn't feel. Let her try. Outside, construction workers across the street were yelling over drills and engines. The city didn't care who was winning or losing, it just kept moving. And somewhere in that chaos, I realized I wasn't scared of falling anymore. I'd already lived at the bottom. There was nowhere left to go but up. The first grant deposit hit the account on a Tuesday morning, and I stared at the screen longer than I should have. 7 digits. More money than I'd ever seen in one place. Gregory Hale had emailed me that morning with his usual calm precision. Funds transferred. Keep receipts. Quarterly audit in 90 days. I laughed under my breath. 90 days to prove I wasn't some fraud with a charity license. Fair enough. I'd been questioned for less. Tommy walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You look like someone who just found out she's rich." "I'm not rich," I said. "I'm responsible," he snorted. That's what rich people say before they hire accountants. We'd spent the last 2 weeks cleaning up the building, hauling out old junk, repainting walls. The place finally smelled like fresh latex paint instead of mildew. The front room had a sign now hand-painted but bold. Wade Veterans Outreach Program. The neighbors had started calling it the Vet House. I liked that better. Our first real day of operation came faster than I expected. We set up folding tables, a donated coffee machine, and a stack of intake forms. Dr. Brooks brought in 2 therapists, both veterans themselves. They'd volunteered part-time until we could pay them. At 9 sharp, the first wave of people arrived, 6 men and 1 woman. All of them looked exactly how I remembered feeling that winter. Tired, cautious, waiting for disappointment. I introduced myself simply. "My name's Maeve Carter. I'm a veteran like you. This isn't a shelter, it's a restart." One guy in the back raised a hand. "What's the catch?" I smiled. "You have to want it." The room went quiet. It wasn't an inspirational speech, but it landed. They filled out the forms and stayed. The following weeks were chaos wrapped in good intentions. The plumbing failed twice, the heat went out once, and Denise, the Navy vet from earlier, punched a hole in the wall during a panic attack. She apologized with tears and helped patch it the next day. Tommy ran supply drives like a drill sergeant, barking at volunteers half his age. "If you've never slept on concrete, don't tell me how to organize blankets," he'd shout, and somehow everyone respected him for it. Dr. Brooks turned the upstairs into a counseling area. He'd meet with people behind closed doors for hours, emerging with that quiet look that said he'd been holding someone else's pain. And me? I worked the floor. Intake, logistics, medical checks, calls to the VA, chasing paperwork that always led nowhere. Every night, I'd collapse into the office chair, too wired to sleep, too tired to stop. Gregory visited once, wearing his usual Navy suit that looked allergic to dust. He walked through the rooms, taking notes on a clipboard. "Impressive progress," he said. "I didn't expect to see this much so soon." "Neither did I admitted. "We're up to 30 residents. Half have jobs lined up. A few are starting therapy." He nodded approvingly. Mr. Wade would be pleased. I didn't respond. I didn't know what pleased a dead man anymore. After he left, Tommy leaned against the doorframe. "You ever get the feeling this is too much for just 3 people?" "Every day," I said. He grinned. "Good. Means you're doing something worth it." By month 3, the place had momentum. Local businesses started donating supplies. A diner owner dropped off leftover food twice a week. A retired nurse came by on weekends to help with basic care. People were talking about us, the vet house that worked. Then the backlash started. It began with a newspaper article, "Homeless Vet Center under investigation for financial mismanagement." The source was anonymous, but the timing wasn't. Gregory called me that night. "Maeve," he said, voice tight. "You didn't speak to any reporters, correct?" "Of course not. Why?" "The claims are false, but perception matters. We'll handle the legal side. In the meantime, expect questions." I didn't need to ask who was behind it. Isabel had always known where to stick the knife. The next morning, a TV van parked across the street. A reporter shouted questions while I carried boxes inside. "Miss Carter, are you misusing veteran aid funds?" Tommy stepped between us. "She's using funds to buy people their lives back. Maybe that's your headline." The story aired anyway, spliced clips, dramatic music, zero context. Donations froze overnight. Our operating account dropped to fumes within a week. I sat at my desk that Friday, staring at the numbers like I could will them to change. "If we can't make payroll next month, we'll lose the staff," I told Dr. Brooks. He rubbed his temples. "You could appeal for public funding." "Yeah," I said. "And wait 9 months for approval. These people don't have 9 months." Tommy slammed a folder down. "Then we go old school. I'll talk to the Legion. They've got members who'd back us if they knew what we're doing." We launched an emergency fundraiser. Word spread fast through veteran circles. People sent small donations, $20, $50, sometimes $100. One letter came from a guy in Arizona who wrote, "You helped a friend of mine when no one else would. This is all I can send." Inside was a crumpled $10 bill. It was enough. Barely. The article's firestorm lasted 2 weeks before dying out, but the damage lingered. I was reminded how fragile good things are when the world wants them broken. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found Tommy sitting outside the back door smoking a cigarette he'd rolled from loose tobacco. He looked worn, like a man aging faster than time allowed. "You ever think about quitting?" he asked quietly. "Every day," I said. "You?" He exhaled smoke into the cold air. "Every hour. But then I remember that kid last week, the one who got a job at the mechanic's shop. He walked in here half dead, and now he's got grease under his nails again. That's enough for me." I nodded. "That's enough for me too." He chuckled. "You know, if Isabel shows up here, I might accidentally forget my manners." "She will," I said. "It's what she does." He looked over. "You sure you can keep this up?" "No," I said honestly, "but I'll try until I can't." The next day brought a small miracle. A man in a gray hoodie came by asking if he could help paint. He'd been homeless for 6 years, a Marine who'd lost both parents while deployed. He didn't need a bed, just a chance to give back. By sundown, he'd repainted 2 rooms and fixed the broken front steps. Dr. Brooks called it volunteer therapy. I called it survival disguised as purpose. We kept going, day by day, crisis by crisis. Gregory's quarterly review came right on schedule. He sat across from me in the office, flipping through my reports. 43 veterans assisted, 24 employed, 18 in stable housing. Impressive. He paused, tapping a line with his pen. "But your cash flow margin is concerning. You'll need to stabilize before the next audit." "I know," I said. "We'll find a way." He studied me for a moment. "Mr. Wade's choice was risky, but I see why he chose you. You don't scare easily." I almost smiled. "That's because I've already seen the worst of it." As he left, Tommy poked his head in. "So, boss," he said, "what's next?" I glanced out the window at the flickering streetlight, the one that never fully worked. "Same as always," I said. "We keep the lights on." And as the hum of the city bled through the cracked walls, the building didn't feel broken anymore. It felt alive, like every nail and scar in it had earned its place. The letter from the state inspector came in a plain white envelope with a polite threat inside. "We've received multiple complaints regarding safety and financial practices at the Wade Veterans Outreach Program," it read. "An in-person audit will occur within 10 business days." Tommy read it over my shoulder and muttered, "You can smell Isabel all over this." He wasn't wrong. Only someone with influence and time to waste on revenge could weaponize bureaucracy like this. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash. Fine, I said. We'll pass the audit. We've got nothing to hide. I know. Dr. Brooks leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. You know how this works, Maeve. The truth doesn't matter. The appearance does. He was right. It wasn't about legality, it was about optics. Isabel didn't need to prove anything. She just needed to make people doubt. Within days, word spread. Volunteers started asking questions. Donations dipped again. A couple of residents even packed their bags, worried they'd lose their housing if the center got shut down. Let her play her games, Tommy said, trying to sound calm. We'll still be standing when she's bored. But Isabel wasn't the type to get bored. 2 days later, I got a call from a local reporter. Miss Carter, the woman said, would you like to comment on allegations that your foundation's money is being used for personal expenses? I nearly dropped the phone. What personal expenses? The Mercedes registered under your name, she said smoothly. I froze. I don't even own a car. Well, she said, according to public records, one was purchased 2 weeks ago with funds from the Wade Veterans Trust. I hung up before she could say more. My pulse was pounding. Gregory, I said the moment he picked up, tell me, this is a mistake. He sighed through the phone. It's not. A fraudulent transaction was processed under your name. We're investigating, but the paperwork looks authentic. Authentic? I barked. I live in an office that used to be a storage closet. Do I sound like someone driving a Mercedes? He didn't argue. Just stay calm. We'll trace it. Tommy kicked the wall. Your sister's behind this, no question. I sat down hard. It wasn't just about me anymore. If the audit found even one irregularity, everything we'd built would crumble. Dr. Brooks arrived an hour later with a thick folder. We'll tighten every record, he said. I'll stay up all night if I have to. She wants to drag you down, not the people you're helping. So we worked. For 3 straight nights, the 3 of us combed through receipts, invoices, transaction logs, every penny accounted for, every hour verified. I double-checked every staff member's pay. Nothing was out of line except for the one false purchase, the Phantom Mercedes. By the time the inspector arrived, I was running on caffeine and spite. She was a young woman in a navy pantsuit, polite but sharp-eyed. She walked through the building with a clipboard, asking questions in a voice that could slice through glass. How many residents are currently enrolled? 56, I said. 34 in housing, 22 in job training. And your staff? 4 full-time, 6 volunteers. She nodded, jotting notes. And transportation expenses? I clenched my jaw. We don't have a vehicle. Interesting, she said. Because our report shows a Mercedes purchased last month registered to you. 1. Tommy stepped in before I could explode. Lady, you're welcome to check our parking lot. Closest thing we've got to a Mercedes is the coffee maker. She didn't laugh. We'll verify that. The inspection took 6 hours. She checked fire exits, reviewed safety plans, interviewed residents. Denise the Navy vet told her flatly, I'd still be sleeping under a bridge if it wasn't for this place. Ugh. By sunset, the inspector gathered her papers and said, You'll receive the findings within 2 weeks. As soon as the door closed, I collapsed into the nearest chair. 2 weeks, I said. That's how long we're going to hang on a thread. Tommy opened a beer and handed it to me. Then we hold on. The next few days were quiet in that dangerous way storms are before they hit. We kept the work going because what else could we do? Veterans still showed up needing help. One man came in barefoot, another shaking from withdrawal. We patched them up, gave them food, found beds. I wasn't about to stop saving lives because my sister wanted to ruin mine. But the noise was getting louder. News channels picked up the audit story. Social media buzzed with charity scandal headlines. Every time I opened my phone, I saw my name next to words like fraud and investigation. Dr. Brooks suggested I lay low, but Tommy had another idea. Screw hiding, he said. Tell the truth, in your own words. He grabbed his old laptop and set up a camera on the desk. You talk, he said. I'll upload it. People deserve to hear it straight from you. I hesitated, then nodded. The light on the camera blinked red. My name is Maeve Carter, I began. I'm a former combat medic. After I left the army, I became homeless. I lived on the streets until someone gave me a second chance. Now, I run this place a home for veterans who've been forgotten, like I was. I don't drive a Mercedes. I don't live in a mansion. Everything you see here was built from nothing but work, faith, and stubbornness. I looked straight into the camera. If anyone doubts me, come see for yourself. Talk to the people here. Watch what happens when we give veterans their dignity back. That's the truth. That's all I have. Tommy uploaded the video that night. It went viral. Veterans across the country shared it. Former soldiers, Marines, nurses, people I'd never met commented, "She's one of us, she's the real deal." Donations started trickling back in. 2 weeks later, Gregory called. His tone was lighter than I'd heard in months. "The audit cleared you completely. The car purchase was traced to a shell company registered under an alias connected to, well, let's just say someone close to your sister." I leaned back in my chair, heart hammering. "Is she going to be charged?" He sighed. "Maybe. But that's not your concern. You've been cleared. Publicly. Officially." Tommy whooped loud enough to wake the whole building. Dr. Brooks actually smiled for once. "You did it," he said. I shook my head. "No, we did it." The next morning, residents gathered around a small TV in the common room. The local news played a segment. Wade Veterans Outreach, cleared of all accusations founder, commended for integrity. The reporter who'd hounded me earlier now stood outside our building, smiling like she'd always been on my side. Tommy turned off the TV. "Guess you're the face of the comeback now." "Not interested," I said. "The work's not done." We spent the rest of the day fixing a broken water heater and installing new bunks. The smell of sweat and paint filled the air. For the first time in months, it didn't feel like survival. It felt like progress. But that night, when I finally locked the office door and sat down, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It read, "You might have won this round, but you still owe me everything." No name, no signature, just the familiar chill of someone who never learned how to lose. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then put the phone face down and looked out the window at the city lights. The thing about revenge, it never ends where you think it will. And family? That's just revenge, with shared DNA. The text sat in my phone for days before I finally deleted it. I didn't need to keep proof of Isabel's threats. She wasn't stupid enough to make her moves that obvious twice. But even without her name on the screen, she was still there lurking behind every interview request, every donation that suddenly fell through, every whisper that maybe the vet house wasn't as noble as it looked. I tried not to show it, but Tommy noticed. "You look like you're waiting for another grenade to drop," he said one morning as we unloaded food from a delivery truck. "Because I am," I said, "and this time, I don't think I'll see it coming." He tossed me a water bottle. "That's the thing about grenades, Doc. They always land where you least expect." We got back to work. The foundation had survived the audit, but it came at a cost. Our reputation was bruised, our funding thin, and my nerves stretched so tight that every phone ring made me flinch. Still, the line outside our door kept growing. Veterans from all over New York were showing up, some with referrals, others with nothing but a name and a backpack. A guy named Lester came in one afternoon. Iraq vet, early 40s. Looked like he'd been living out of a subway station for months. He had burns on his hands and a look in his eyes that didn't belong to this decade. "I heard this place doesn't turn people away," he said. "That's true," I replied, "but we do expect you to try." He nodded once and stayed. Over the next few weeks, I watched him start to come back to life, small things at first. A clean shirt, a haircut. Then one day, he started helping the kitchen crew. It reminded me of the rule Dr. Brooks kept repeating: purpose heals faster than pills. We'd hit 64 veterans housed or employed. The number looked good on paper, but it didn't tell the truth, the losses behind the progress. One man overdosed after 2 months in our program. Another disappeared after a job interview. Denise relapsed and ended up in a hospital. Every failure hit harder than any win. One night, I sat in my office staring at their names. "I'm supposed to hit 75, I whispered. "But at what cost?" Dr. Brooks was sitting across from me, arms folded, watching quietly. "You can't save everyone, Maeve. Tell that to the people we've buried." "I have," he said softly, "and they would tell you to keep going." The lights flickered once, then steadied. I rubbed my temples, exhausted. "Sometimes I think this whole thing is a punishment, not a gift." He tilted his head. "Maybe it's both." By spring, things began to shift. Gregory helped us secure a government partnership, a grant that covered mental health and housing services for vets. It wasn't permanent, but it bought us time. For the first time since the will was read, I could breathe. We expanded into a second floor. Tommy found bunk beds through a church donation drive. The walls still looked rough, but now there were bulletin boards filled with job postings, therapy schedules, and photos of people smiling real smiles, not the practiced kind. Still, something in me couldn't relax. One afternoon, I received a voicemail from an unknown number. It was Isabel's voice, calm, clipped, and venom wrapped in silk. "I hope you're proud, Maeve. All that good press, you're practically a saint now. But remember, saints fall hardest. Enjoy your spotlight while it lasts." I didn't tell Gregory, didn't tell anyone. I just deleted it and kept moving. But that night, I dreamt of her standing at the edge of the old family house, the one she stole from me, smiling while it burned. The next morning, Tommy found me pacing the courtyard with coffee gone cold. "You look like hell," he said. "Thanks. Trying out a new look." He leaned against the wall. "You ever think she's just jealous?" "She's not jealous," I said. "She's angry. And anger doesn't fade, it festers." Tommy shrugged. "Then let her rot. You've got people to save." It was a good line. I almost believed it. Later that day, a man came into the office asking for me specifically. He wore a suit cheap, but pressed and carried an envelope. "Miss Carter," he said. "I represent Miss Isabel Carter. You've been served." 1. He handed me the papers. Defamation lawsuit, claims of slander, emotional distress, reputational harm. I skimmed the legal jargon until one sentence caught my eye. The defendant, Miss Maeve Carter, has publicly and maliciously damaged my client's career and personal standing through false allegations. I laughed out loud. "She's suing me for telling the truth?" "Seems that way," Tommy said. "Can she even do that?" Gregory could. He called within an hour of getting my message. "Don't worry," he said. "It's a stunt. She doesn't have a case." "She doesn't need a case," I said. "She just needs noise." He paused. "You're right. But remember, truth still matters in court." I sighed. That's what scares me. The truth isn't always enough outside of it. The legal mess dragged on for months. Isabel never showed up in person, only through lawyers and headlines. Every hearing was another headline. Sister versus sister. Battle over a $49 million legacy. The public loved it. They always do when family turns into blood sport. Meanwhile, the work at the vet house never stopped. I made sure of that. If Isabel wanted a war, she was going to have to fight it against progress itself. By midsummer, the lawsuit collapsed. The judge dismissed it for lack of evidence. Gregory called me that morning with the verdict. "You're officially free of her claims," he said. "Yeah," I said, staring out the window. "But not of her." He didn't argue. A week later, Isabel was arrested for financial fraud. Nothing to do with me directly, but it was poetic. The same tricks she used to forge my name years ago had finally caught up to her. Gregory confirmed it quietly. The feds built a case. She's facing serious time. I didn't feel joy. I just felt tired. That night, the residents cooked dinner for the staff: spaghetti, garlic bread, cheap red wine. Marcus gave a toast. "To Maeve," he said, "for showing us that broken people still build things that last." Everyone cheered. I raised my glass but couldn't speak. My throat felt tight. Mercy had never felt this heavy. After dinner, Tommy found me alone in the hallway. "You did it," he said. "No," I said. "We're still missing 11. He smiled faintly. "Always counting. It's the only thing keeping me sane." He clapped me on the shoulder. "You keep chasing that number, Doc, because when you hit 75, you won't even realize you've fixed yourself in the process." I didn't answer. I just looked through the window at the city lights and thought about Isabel sitting in a cell somewhere, still probably blaming me for everything. Mercy had its price, and tonight it felt like I'd paid it in full. The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and cold marble, the kind of sterile scent that made memories go quiet. I hadn't planned to go, but Gregory said the sentencing was open to the public. "It's your choice," he told me over the phone. "Closure doesn't always come by staying away." Closure. That word always sounded like a fairy tale people tell themselves when the pain stops screaming. But something in me needed to see it, to look Isabel in the eye and figure out what was left of her under all that hatred. I sat in the back row while the prosecutor read off a list of charges. Wire fraud, identity theft, falsifying financial documents. Isabel stood at the defense table, hair tied back, face pale, wearing a beige suit that looked borrowed. The confident posture she'd once carried like armor was gone. When the judge handed down the sentence, 4 years in federal prison, she didn't cry, didn't plead. She just nodded once, as if she'd already accepted it long before stepping into that room. Afterward, Gregory leaned toward me. They'll transfer her next week. You can see her before that if you want. I hesitated. Does she want to see me? She asked for it. The visiting room at Rikers was exactly how I imagined it. Gray walls, plastic chairs, a constant buzz of voices. Isabel walked in, escorted by a guard. She looked smaller somehow, like the air had been let out of her. She sat across from me and studied my face before saying anything. You look healthy, she said. I eat regular meals now, I replied. A humorless smile crossed her lips. Guess we switched places. I didn't respond. The silence stretched until she broke it again. I didn't expect you to come. I didn't expect you to ask. Her hands fidgeted with the edge of her jumpsuit sleeve. You were always the strong one, she said quietly. I just learned to fake it better. Is that supposed to make this easier? No, she said. Nothing makes this easier. I just wanted you to hear it from me. I never meant for it to go that far. I leaned forward. You forged my name, tanked my credit, tried to destroy everything I built. How far did you think it would go? Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. You got everything, Maeve. Dad's pride, Mom's affection, the medals, the sympathy. I was always the screw-up in the family, and the day you came home from deployment, everyone treated you like a hero. I just snapped. Alu, you think being homeless was glory? My voice cracked sharper than I wanted. You think sleeping behind dumpsters made me some kind of saint? She swallowed hard. No, I think it made you someone people could love, and I hated you for it. The words hung there, raw and naked. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The guard's radio buzzed in the background. Somewhere, someone laughed too loud. Finally, I said, I didn't build this life to beat you, Isabel. I built it because no one else would. She nodded slowly. And you did. You proved everyone wrong. I didn't answer. Because in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't trying to win anymore. She was trying to be human again. When the guard told us our time was up, Isabel stood. I'm sorry, she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. You don't have to forgive me. I just didn't want to die without saying it. I stood too. You won't die, Isabel. You'll just have to live with yourself. She gave a small, broken smile. That might be worse. As she walked away, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, not victory, just release. Like exhaling after holding your breath for years. Back at the vet house, life rolled on. The kitchen smelled like chili. Someone was fixing a radio in the corner. Tommy was arguing with a new volunteer about whether instant coffee counted as real caffeine. It felt like home again. Doctor. Brooks found me later in the office, sorting through paperwork. You look different, he said. Prison chic? I joked weakly. He chuckled. No, lighter. Maybe I'm just tired. He studied me for a moment. Sometimes letting go of anger feels a lot like exhaustion. Don't confuse the two. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned to the window where the city lights flickered against the skyline. Do you ever think people can really change? I asked. He thought about it. Not easily. But guilt's a good motivator. So is love. The next few months passed quietly. Isabel wrote once from prison. The envelope arrived with government stamps and no return address, but the handwriting was hers, sharp and deliberate. Inside was a single page. Maeve, they have us working in the library here. I shelve books. It's boring, but maybe that's what I deserve. I'm learning things I never had the patience to before. I even read about Colton Wade, the man who started all this. You should know. He was right about you. You were always the one meant to fix what the rest of us broke. I don't expect a reply. Just keep doing what you're doing. Isabel. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. That evening, Tommy was setting up a projector in the common area. Movie night, he announced. We're showing Saving Private Ryan again because apparently none of you cry enough already. I laughed. That movie's 2.5 hours of trauma flashbacks. You're a sadist. As one, he grinned. Exactly. Builds character. We sat with the residents, watching scenes of soldiers running through fire and chaos. Somewhere between the explosions and the silence that followed, I felt a tear roll down my cheek, not because of the movie, but because of everything it represented. Afterward, Tommy turned to me. You okay? Yeah, I said quietly. Just remembering. Good, he said. Means you're still in it. Outside, the city hummed with life sirens, laughter, car horns. I thought of Isabel's letter, of her shelving books in a quiet prison library. Maybe that was her version of peace. Maybe redemption doesn't look like freedom, it just looks like facing the truth and surviving it. I walked through the halls, checking on everyone before lights out. Lester was reading a paperback. Denise was knitting again, hands steady this time. A new guy was sketching on scrap paper, drawing the outline of a flag. I stopped at the doorway, watching them. Every single person in that building was fighting a battle the world couldn't see. And somehow, that made me feel less alone. The truth was simple. Forgiveness wasn't something you gave to others, it was something you gave yourself so you could keep going. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the weight of my past dragging behind me. When I turned off the lights and locked the office door, the quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. The rain started before dawn, soft at first, then steady, the kind that seeps into everything, even your bones. I was standing by the window of my office at the vet house, watching puddles form in the parking lot, when Tommy knocked on the door with his elbow. He was holding 2 coffees and a file folder that looked like it had seen better days. You're not gonna like this, he said, handing me the folder. That's how every good story starts, I muttered. He waited until I opened it. Inside were reports, charts, and the official audit summary Gregory had sent over. 74 successful reintegrations. One short. One, Tommy said. After everything, one person. I stared at the number, the absurdity of it. 3 years of blood, exhaustion, loss, and I was one person away from fulfilling a dead man's will. It's just a number, I said, but even I didn't believe it. Dr. Brooks appeared in the doorway. Gregory called. The deadline's this Friday at midnight. After that, the estate technically defaults to the secondary heir. Isabel? He nodded. Even with her conviction, she's still legally listed. The clause was never amended. Tommy cursed under his breath. That's rich. She tries to destroy you and might still walk away with the money. I sat down, feeling the weight of it. It's not about the money anymore. It's about finishing what I started. Brooks nodded slowly. Then we find one more. We spent the next 2 days combing through outreach lists. Most of the city's shelters already worked with us. I called old contacts, churches, hospitals, even a few cops who'd sent veterans our way. No one new fit the criteria. Then Tommy walked in with a name scribbled on a diner napkin. Met this guy downtown, he said. Lives under the overpass near Fulton Street. Says he's Army. Calls himself Hawk. Didn't give a last name. He's got that look like someone who stopped believing a long time ago. I grabbed my jacket. Let's go. We found him sitting on a milk crate, rain dripping through a hole in the bridge above. He had a gray beard, a weathered army jacket, and eyes that flicked up just long enough to size us up before returning to the ground. Mr. Hawk? I said. He didn't answer. I'm not here to preach or sell anything. I'm Maeve. I run the Wade Veterans Outreach Program. He laughed a dry, cracked sound. Yeah, heard of you. The lady who thinks she can fix the world, just trying to fix a few people in it. He looked up, squinting. Why me? Because you served, I said, and because you deserve better than this. He didn't move. You ever lose someone over there? Yes. He nodded once. Then you know. Some of us don't come back all the way. We stood there in the rain, saying nothing. I was about to hand him my card when he said quietly, You got food at your place? Yeah, I said. Hot food. Real bets. He stared for another beat, then stood slowly. Then maybe I'll come see what all the noise is about. That's how number 75 walked into my life. At first, Hawk barely spoke. He ate, showered, slept for 16 hours straight. When he finally came downstairs, he wandered into the counseling office where Dr. Brooks was making notes. "You, the head doc?" he asked. "Something like that," Brooks said. "Good. You got coffee?" 2 hours later, they were still talking. Turns out Hawk had been a medic in Afghanistan the same as me. His unit got ambushed, and he was the only one who made it out. The guilt had eaten him alive. He'd spent a decade drifting through jobs and shelters before the streets swallowed him. Over the next few weeks, he started helping out in small ways, organizing supplies, fixing broken locks, showing other vets how to field dress injuries properly. It was like watching someone remember who they were piece by piece. One afternoon, Gregory showed up with his briefcase. "The board's meeting tonight," he said. "We'll need the documentation for all 75 cases." I looked at Hawk, who was helping paint the hallway. "He's the last one," I said. "The one that finishes it." Gregory raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," he nodded. "Then we'll finalize it tomorrow." That night, I stayed late in the office. The rain had stopped, and the air outside smelled like wet asphalt and spring. I opened the file. Gregory had sent a scanned letter from Colton Wade, written years before his death. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. "To whoever inherits my fortune, wealth means nothing if it doesn't repair what's broken. I built my life on the backs of men and women who never got their second chance. I want to give them one through you. If you fail, the money returns to where it came from, family, but if you succeed, you'll prove that blood alone doesn't define legacy. Choice does." I leaned back, exhaling. For the first time, I understood what he meant. The next morning, Gregory returned with papers for me to sign. "Congratulations, Miss Carter," he said. "You've fulfilled every condition. The estate is officially yours." I didn't touch the pen. "Transfer it to the foundation," I said. He blinked. "All of it?" "Every cent. It was never mine to begin with." He studied me for a long moment, then smiled. "You really are your great-grandfather's legacy." Tommy burst in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Well, boss, did we win?" I looked at him and grinned. "We didn't win anything, Tommy. We just finished the mission." He handed me a cup and said, "Same thing, if you ask me." By the end of the week, the vet house had expanded again, new beds, new counseling offices, a kitchen that didn't leak. Hawk was officially hired as maintenance supervisor, though he preferred the title ground operations. Denise led the women's support group. Dr. Brooks got funding to bring in more therapists. One night I found Hawk sitting outside smoking, watching the city lights. "You never told me why you called yourself Hawk," I said. He smirked. "Because I used to think I could see everything coming. Turns out I couldn't." I sat beside him. "None of us can." He nodded toward the building. "You know this place. These people, you gave them a reason to stop hiding." I smiled. They gave me one too. The quiet stretched between us, comfortable this time. Then he said, "So what happens now?" I thought about it. The inheritance, the years, the ghosts we'd carried. "Now," I said finally, "we just keep saving one more." The lights from passing cars reflected off the windows, casting brief flashes of brightness across the courtyard. For once, it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a promise quietly keeping itself. The morning after the last paperwork was signed, the city felt unusually still. I drove through downtown before sunrise, passing empty sidewalks and the faint hum of traffic lights switching from red to green. For once, my head wasn't full of deadlines or damage control. It was just quiet. At the vet house, the front door was already propped open. The smell of coffee and fresh paint drifted into the street. Hawk was patching a wall by the entrance, radio tuned to a station that played old rock ballads. Tommy sat on the front steps, feeding the stray cat that had adopted us. "Morning, boss," he said, handing me a cup. "You look like someone who finally got 8 hours of sleep." "6, I said, but they were quality hours." He grinned. "Close enough." Inside, the place didn't look like the same building we'd started with. There were new windows, new floors, a mural of the American flag painted by one of the residents. Denise was running a support session upstairs. The sound of laughter filtered down the hall, a sound that, not long ago, would have felt impossible here. Gregory arrived mid-morning with a briefcase and his usual calm. "I wanted to deliver this personally," he said, handing me a sealed envelope. "What is it this time? Another audit?" He smiled. "Something nicer. The official confirmation of the full transfer." You are now the legal owner and chair of the Wade Veterans Foundation. I stared at the papers. There it was, in black and white final, irreversible. Feels strange, I said quietly. To actually own something that was never supposed to be mine. Gregory nodded. Maybe that's exactly why it is. He checked his watch and added, There's one more thing. We found something in Mr. Wade's archive, a letter addressed to you. Handwritten. End of 4. He handed me another envelope, this one older, yellowed at the edges. The handwriting was elegant but shaky. I took it to my office and sat down before opening it. Maeve, if you're reading this, it means you've done what even I doubted possible. You gave life back to people who'd been written off, and in doing so, you proved what I always believed deep down, that the hardest battles are the ones we fight when no one's watching. You don't know this, but your grandmother saved my life after the war. I promised her that one day, I'd return that favor to her bloodline. It took me decades to figure out how. I didn't want to leave you money. I wanted to leave you meaning. Money can buy comfort. Only purpose can buy peace. I suspect you understand that now better than anyone. I hope when you walk through the halls of that house, you feel not just the weight of what's been given, but the freedom of what you've earned. That is your true inheritance. Colton Wade. By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. The air felt heavy and light at the same time. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the desk drawer next to my old military ID, the two halves of my life, finally side by side. When I stepped outside, Tommy was fixing the flagpole. The wind had torn the corner of the flag last week, and he'd been determined to patch it himself. You okay? He asked, seeing my face. Yeah, I said, just realizing how far we've come. He nodded. You think Wade's watching? I think they all are. By afternoon, the foundation hosted its first open house event. Local officials came by. Donors, veterans, even a few reporters. No speeches, no politics, just food, music, and stories. Hawk gave a short tour to a group of new volunteers, telling them how every piece of furniture had a story, how every person here had earned their spot. Dr. Brooks stood beside me, arms folded. You built something real here, Maeve. We built it, I said. Together. He smiled faintly. You ever think about what's next? I looked around the laughter, the chatter, the faint sound of someone tuning a guitar in the corner. This, I said, this is what's next. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned, a young woman approached me. Early 20s, wearing a faded army jacket a few sizes too big. Her name was Cora. She said she'd been sleeping in her car for 3 weeks after losing her job. I saw your story online, she said nervously. I didn't think it was real. It's real, I said, handing her a form, and we've got a bed open. As she filled out her information, I felt the same quiet certainty I'd felt that first day with Tommy, like the whole thing was starting over again, only stronger this time. When night fell, the building went still, except for the hum of the heater. I walked the halls one last time before locking up. In the common room, a wall had been covered with photos before and after shots of every veteran we'd helped. Some smiling, some solemn, all changed. At the center of the wall, Tommy had hung a plaque. Wade House for Veterans, dedicated to those who served and those still fighting to come home. I ran my fingers over the engraved letters and felt something shift deep inside, not pride, exactly, but peace. The kind that doesn't come from finishing something, but from knowing it will keep going without you. Before leaving, I stopped at the window. Outside, the streetlights glowed faintly in the mist. The city was alive, indifferent, endless, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small against it. I thought of Isabel. She'd be released next year, according to Gregory. Maybe she'd walk out into the same city, searching for her own way to make things right. Maybe she'd visit. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, the story between us wasn't hate anymore. It was history. I thought of my unit, the friends who never came home, of the people we'd helped find theirs, of Colton Wade's letter, sitting quietly in the drawer. The rain started again, soft, steady, the kind that doesn't announce itself, just falls. I stood there for a moment, letting the sound fill the silence. The real inheritance wasn't the money or the house or the paperwork. It was the second chance to do something good, to turn pain into purpose, and to know that somewhere, Someone would keep that chain alive. When I turned off the lights and stepped outside, Hawk called after me from the porch. "Hey, boss," he said, grinning. "You locking up?" "Yeah," I said. "But I'll be back tomorrow." He laughed. "You always are." I smiled, hands in my pockets, walking into the soft rain. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was coming from somewhere. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be.